To call the Prime Minister to make a statement, who will be making the statement remotely. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And with permission, I will update the House on the government's integrated review of foreign defence, security and development policy. Our review will conclude early next year, setting out the UK's international agenda. But I want to inform the House of its first outcome. For decades, British governments have trimmed and cheese-pared our defence budget. And if we go on like this, we risk waking up to discover that our armed forces, the pride of Britain, have fallen below the minimum threshold of viability. And once lost, they can never be regained. That outcome would not only be craven, it would jeopardise the security of the British people, amounting to a dereliction of duty for any Prime Minister. So I refuse to vindicate any pessimistic forecasters there may have been by taking up the scalpel yet again. Based on our assessment of the international situation and our foreign policy goals, I've decided that the era of cutting our defence budget must end, and it ends now. I'm increasing defence spending by £24.1 billion over the next 4 years. That's £16.5 billion more than our manifesto commitment, raising it as a share of GDP to at least 2.2%, exceeding our NATO pledge and investing £190 billion over the next 4 years. More than any other European country and more than any other NATO ally except the United States. The Ministry of Defence has received a multi-year settlement because equipping our armed forces requires long-term investment, and our national security in 20 years' time will depend on decisions we take today. I've done this in the teeth of the pandemic amid every other demand on our resources, because the defence of the realm and the safety of the British people must come first. I pay tribute to my right honourable friends, the Chancellor and the Defence Secretary, who believe in this as fervently as I do. Reviving our armed forces is one pillar of the government's ambition to safeguard Britain's interests and values by strengthening our global influence and reinforcing our ability to join the United States and our other allies to defend free and open societies. The international situation is now more perilous and intensely competitive than at any time since the Cold War. Everything we do in this country, every job, every business, even how we shop and what we eat, depend on a basic minimum of global security, a web of feed pipes, of oxygen pipes that must be kept open, shipping lanes, a functioning internet, safe air corridors, reliable undersea cables, and tranquility in distant straits. This pandemic has offered a taste of what happens when our most fundamental needs are suddenly in question. And we could take all this for granted, ignore the threat of terrorism and the ambitions of hostile states, hope for the best, and we might get away with it for a while before calamity strikes, as it surely would, or we could accept that our lifelines must be protected, but we're content to curl up in our island and leave the task to our friends. My starting point is that either of those options would be an abdication of the first duty of government to defend our people. My choice, and I hope it will carry every member of the House, is that Britain must be true to our history, to stand alongside our allies, sharing the burden and bringing our expertise to bear on the world's toughest problems. To achieve this, we need to upgrade our capabilities across the board. We've already united our international effort into a new department combining aid and diplomacy, led with grit and purpose by my right honourable friend, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Secretary. Next year will be a year of British leadership when we preside over the G7, when we host COP26 in Glasgow and celebrate the 75th anniversary of the first United Nations General Assembly in London. We're leading the world towards net zero with our 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. And we're campaigning for our values, particularly freedom of religion and the media, and giving every girl in the world access to 12 years of quality education. But extending British influence requires a once-in-a-generation modernization of our armed forces. And now is the right time to press ahead, because emerging technologies, visible on the horizon, will make the returns from defense investment infinitely greater. We have a chance to break free from the vicious circle whereby we ordered ever decreasing numbers of ever more expensive items of military hardware, squandering billions along the way. The latest advances will multiply the fighting power of every warship, aircraft, and infantry unit many times over. And the prizes will go to the swiftest and most agile nations, not necessarily the biggest. We can achieve as much as British ingenuity and expertise allow. We will need to act speedily to remove or reduce less relevant capabilities, and this will allow our new investment to be focused on the technologies that will revolutionize warfare. Forging our military assets into a single network designed to overcome the enemy. So a soldier in hostile territory will be alerted to a distant ambush by sensors or satellites or drones, instantly transmitting a warning, using artificial intelligence to devise the optimal response, and offering an array of options, from summoning an airstrike to ordering a swarm attack by drones, or paralyzing the enemy with cyber weapons. New advances will surmount the old limits of logistics. Our warships and combat vehicles will carry directed energy weapons, destroying targets with inexhaustible lasers. And for them, the phrase "out of ammunition" will become redundant. Nations are racing to master this new doctrine of warfare, and our investment is designed to place Britain among the winners. The returns will go far beyond our armed forces. From aerospace to autonomous vehicles, these technologies have a vast array of civilian applications, opening up new vistas of economic progress, creating 10,000 jobs every year, 40,000 in total, levelling up across our country and reinforcing our union. We're going to use our extra defence spending to restore Britain's position as the foremost naval power in Europe, taking forward our plans for 8 Type 26 and 5 Type 31 frigates and support ships to supply our carriers. We're going to develop the next generation of warships, including the multi-role research vessels and Type 32 frigates. And this will spur a renaissance of British shipbuilding across the UK, in Glasgow and Rosyth, Belfast, Appledore and Birkenhead, guaranteeing jobs and illuminating the benefits of the union in the white light of the arc welder's torch. If there is one policy which strengthens the UK in every possible sense, it is building more ships for the Royal Navy. Once both of our carriers are operational in 2023, the UK will have a carrier strike group permanently available, routinely deployed globally, and always ready to fight alongside NATO and other allies. Next year, Queen Elizabeth will lead a British and allied task group on our most ambitious deployment for 2 decades, encompassing the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and East Asia. We shall deploy more of our naval assets in the world's most important regions, protecting the shipping lanes that supply our nation, and we shall press on with renewing our nuclear deterrent. We will reshape our army for the age of networked warfare, allowing better equipped soldiers to deploy more quickly, and strengthening the ability of our special forces to operate covertly against our most sophisticated adversaries. The security and intelligence agencies will continue to protect us around the clock from terrorism and new and evolving threats. We will invest another £1.5 billion in military research and development, designed to master the new technologies of warfare and we will establish a new centre dedicated to artificial intelligence and a new RAF Space Command, launching British satellites and our first rocket from Scotland in 2022. I can announce that we have established a national cyber force, combining our intelligence agencies and service personnel, which is already operating in cyberspace against terrorism, organised crime, and hostile state activity. And the RAF will receive a new fighter system harnessing artificial intelligence and drone technology to defeat any adversary in air-to-air combat. Our plans will safeguard hundreds of thousands of jobs in the defence industry, protecting livelihoods across the UK and keeping the British people safe. The defence of the realm is above party politics, and we all take pride in how British resolve saved democracy in 1940 and British internationalism, directed by Clement Attlee, helped to create NATO and preserve peace through the Cold War. The wisdom and pragmatism of Margaret Thatcher found a path out of confrontation when she met Mikhail Gorbachev in 1984. In each case, Britain tipped the scales of history and did immense good for the world. Now we have a chance to follow in this great tradition, to end the era of retreat, to transform our armed forces, bolster our global influence, unite and level up across our country, protect our people and defend the free societies in which we fervently believe. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. Mr. Speaker, under my leadership, national security will always be Labour's top priority. Britain must once again show global leadership and be a moral force for good in the world, both in how we tackle present and emerging security threats, but also in how we build a fairer, greener and more secure world. So we welcome this additional funding for our defence and security forces, and we agree that it's vital to end what the Prime Minister calls, I have to say with complete lack of self-awareness, an era of retreat. But, Mr. Speaker, this is a spending announcement without a strategy. The government has yet again pushed back vital parts of the integrated review, and there's no clarity over the government's strategic priorities. And then there's the question of money. How will this announcement be paid for? Such is the government's handling of this pandemic that the UK has the sharpest economic downturn of any G7 country. Next week, the Chancellor will have to come here and set out the consequences of that. So can the Prime Minister tell us today, will the commitments he's made require additional borrowing, mean tax rises? If so, which ones? Or will the money have to come from other departmental budgets? In particular, at the election last year, there was a very clear Conservative Party manifesto to, and I quote, spend 0.7% of GNI on international development. So a straight question, Prime Minister. Is the government going to keep to that manifesto commitment? He must know that if he breaks it, that would not only undermine public trust, but also hugely weaken us on the global stage. The Prime Minister spoke of an era of retreat, a really interesting phrase after a decade of Conservative government and underinvestment in our armed forces. Can I remind the House that defence spending has fallen by over £8 billion in real terms over the last 10 years? Over the same period, UK regular forces have decreased by a quarter, and on top of that, the National Audit Office estimate there's a black hole of up to £13 billion in the MOD equipment plan. So the additional funding today is on foundations that have been seriously weakened over the last 10 years. And let me come to a point that's very important to our armed forces personnel. Can the Prime Minister tell us, will there be any further cuts to the size of our armed forces over the period of this spending review? There are a number of other holes in the Prime Minister's plan. With less than 6 weeks to go to the end of the transition period, there's still no clarity about the direction of our post-Brexit foreign or trade policy. And the government has not yet rolled over existing trade agreements with 15 countries. That's deals worth up to £80 billion of trade a year. The Prime Minister speaks of tackling global security threats, improving cyber capability, and that is all welcome, and we welcome it. But 4 months after the Intelligence and Security Committee published its report concluding that Russia posed, and these are their words, an immediate and urgent threat to our national security, can the Prime Minister tell us why he's still not acted on this or followed through on the committee's recommendations? And when will he do so? And Mr. Speaker, there was very little beyond warm words about how the UK will lead the global efforts against the biggest threat we face, the international climate emergency. The COP26 conference is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, but the climate change community says that the UK's domestic measures, quotes, are not making adequate progress in preparation for climate change. And yesterday's announcement, another press release without a strategy, will do nothing to address this. Mr. Speaker, this is a time of huge global uncertainty. It is time for Britain to emerge from a decade of decline. I know the Prime Minister is always keen to talk about the bits of government he enjoys, big announcements, space programmes, moonshots, but this statement shows the government still lacks a clear strategy or a coherent vision for Britain in the world, or any idea how the promises the Prime Minister makes will actually be delivered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of all the humbug I've heard from the right honourable gentleman opposite, I think that really takes the cake. This was a man who campaigned until December last year to install in government a Prime Minister who would have wanted to scrap our armed services and pull out of NATO. And his own record of support of our armed services very, very thin indeed. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that he now welcomes this package. I think I think the comments that he's made about it scarcely do it justice. This is the biggest package of support for our armed services, as I say, since the end of the Cold War. It bears absolutely no relation to discussions about overseas aid, and I can say I think this House and this country should be incredibly proud of what Britain does to support people around the world. And under any view, this country has been and will remain one of the biggest contributors to aid of any country on earth. I'm very, very proud of that. I'm proud of the way this package will help to deliver 40,000 jobs around the UK. And this is the party, Mr. Speaker, that fundamentally believes in defence of the realm, in supporting our armed forces and ensuring that the country as a whole is strong and is able to project our strength around the world. And it was very notable. And this is the country by the party, by the way, the government that instituted such extra protections for our armed services as wraparound childcare for armed services families. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, protects our veterans and the families of veterans from the misery of continual prosecution, vexatious prosecution by well-paid lawyers, Mr. Speaker, long after the alleged crimes were committed and when no new evidence has been provided. And it was the party opposite, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of the gentleman opposite, Mr. Speaker, who refused to vote in favour of the Overseas Operations Bill, which would have given veterans that protection and that reassurance. And Mr. Speaker, I don't think I've heard so much phony stuff from the right honourable gentleman in all the time that we've faced each other so far. This was a guy, Mr. Speaker, who campaigned actively to install somebody who wanted to break up our armed forces and pull out of NATO. I don't know what he was thinking then. He never mentioned his support for the armed services then, and I don't attach, frankly, much credence to it now.
Chair of Select Committee, Tobias Elwood.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome this commitment to significantly upgrade our defence posture, something he knows that I, the Defence Select Committee and others in this House have been calling for some time. Could I also welcome the honesty from the Prime Minister in recognising that the UK and indeed the West have become too risk-averse in standing up to some of the threats that we face. I recall my time of frustration as a foreign minister and defence minister in wanting Britain to play a more assertive and proactive role on the international stage, not just with our hard power, our soft power, but with our thought leadership as well. But there was ever less appetite to do so. So I very much welcome this statement today. Could my right honourable friend assure the House that as we take on the presidency of the G7, we will work closely with the new US administration in boosting Western resolve to confront a growing number of hostile competitors, including China, who have for too long been allowed to pursue their own destabilising and competing agendas?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend, and he's completely right. This package, I believe, will encourage and bolster our friends and our alliances around the world. It enables the UK to project global influence right into the future. That's why it's a multi-year package. And I don't think anybody around the world will be able to doubt from this announcement today our commitment to NATO, to the transatlantic alliance, and to the security of our friends and allies around the world.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. In the SNP, we support a refocusing on the contemporary threats that we face. We need to readjust our defence capabilities for the modern world, and it's especially important that a focus is given to issues such as cyber security. But what we do not accept is that the priorities of this government and the threat of the disbanding of historic regiments such as the Black Watch. Disbanding the Black Watch would show that the promises made to Scotland during the Scottish Independence campaign have been broken, buried and forgotten by this government. We were promised 12,500 personnel to be stationed permanently in Scotland. The number remains well below 10,000. Such broken promises not only mean fewer jobs in Scotland, but also undermines Scotland's security interests. Madam Deputy Speaker, billions of pounds of taxpayers' money are still being spent on Trident nuclear weapons. Scotland remains overwhelmingly opposed to weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde. We need to respond to today's challenges rather than on vanity projects. Madam Deputy Speaker, the SNP also has serious reservations regarding such a windfall to defence spending during these unprecedented times of hardship for so many. This review will reportedly see the UK as Europe's biggest defence spender, when just 3 weeks ago this government refused to provide free school meals for children during the holidays. And we have learned that the UK government is considering cutting the overseas aid budget by billions of pounds. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister may use the term global Britain, but on these benches we believe the Prime Minister has his priorities all wrong. The Tories have closed DFID, one of the most successful departments of government, in order to politicise instead of focusing it on sustainable development goals. In our submission to the Integrated Defence Review, we've put forward sensible suggestions on how to meet the modern-day threat picture, but not to the detriment of our historic regiments in Scotland. I ask the Prime Minister today, will he rule out scrapping the Black Watch and cuts to international aid spending?
Yes.
You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, I mean, it is an absolute disgrace in the face of the threats that we get the contempt that we see yet again this afternoon from the Defence Secretary and his colleagues on the Tory benches. It's shameful, and he really ought to grow up and show some respect to the regiments of Scotland. Madam Deputy Speaker, with independence, Scotland can have a foreign policy that reflects our values and interests and a defence capability that matches capabilities to threats. With our submission to this review, we are looking to play a constructive role in informing UK policy, but we will be setting out how Scotland can play a full role as a normal, law-abiding, values-driven, independent country on the world stage.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can certainly give the right honourable gentleman that guarantee. And once again, he seems to be a veritable geyser of confected indignation. Of course, we're going to guarantee the Black Watch. The DFID will remain in East Kilbride as long as he doesn't continue with his ambitions to break up the United Kingdom. And even if he does, the DFID will remain in East Kilbride. Mr. Speaker, it's preposterous to listen to the Scottish National Party talking about their desire to support defence spending when everybody knows fine well that it's thanks to UK-wide investment that we're able to deliver not just the Black Watch and DFID in East Kilbride, but a fantastic programme of shipbuilding in Govan and in Rosyth. And under his plans, it's not just that there would be no deterrent, there would be no shipbuilding, there would be no Black Watch, Mr. Speaker, in the land of the SNP. That's the reality.
Fox.
Deputy Speaker, can I say to my right honourable friend that this statement smacks not only of promises kept, but promises exceeded, and I congratulate him for that. Does he accept that in an era when global cyber attacks threaten our entire way of life, from the economy to the NHS, that we need to spend more of our defence budget on assets that we cannot see, as well as updating our core assets, and this needs to be clearly explained to the British people? And in this war of the invisible enemy, does he believe that cyber doctrine has evolved to match our capabilities, especially on existential threats, in order to provide adequate deterrence?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy. My right honourable friend is an expert on what he's talking about, and I can tell him that obviously the National Cyber Force is working on doctrine that is currently evolving, but we will deploy our cyber capabilities, I'm sure he and the House would expect, in accordance with international law, and we will do it to protect the British public and our citizens.
We now go to the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we all owe an enormous debt to the brave men and women of our armed forces and security services for their work keeping our country safe. So we will give this review the study it merits, but can I immediately welcome the extra investment in cybersecurity, so Cheltenham's GCHQ and the amazing people who work there can continue to ensure the UK remains a world leader in this crucial aspect of modern defence. But with data and cyber so important to modern defence, he will know that access for our security services and police to European crime databases is vital to keeping the British people safe. So can the Prime Minister guarantee we will retain direct, real-time access to all these European databases after January the 1st?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that we have all the cooperation, and I thank the right honourable gentleman for his point. It's a very important one, and I agree with him what he says about GCHQ and Cheltenham. But I'm assured that we will be able to maintain all the cooperation, all the collaboration that we need to do to protect our people and our citizens, not just with our European friends and partners, but also with Five Eyes and other allies and friends around the world.
Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend has delivered for our armed forces today, and he deserves the support of the whole House, and particularly as he seeks to improve the procurement mechanisms of the Ministry of Defence as well. Will he bear in mind the wise words of General Mattis, the former American Defence Secretary, who told Donald Trump, and I quote, "The more you cut aid, the more I have to spend on ammunition." Britain's development leadership and the standing by our promise to the poorest of the 0.7, which was a manifesto commitment, will stand my right honourable friend in very good stead as he assumes the chairmanship of the G7 on January the 1st and promotes the important values of global Britain.
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful for my right honourable friend's points, and he himself has done extraordinary work to champion the poorest and neediest around the world. And I think that this country, as I say, can be very proud of our record in overseas aid, and we lead the world, will continue to lead the world under this government. What I can say is that this review is about, this statement is about our defence and our security, and there's no read across to any other issue. And this is driven by our need to protect the British public, to keep the world as safe as we possibly can, and to unite and level up across our union with 40,000 more jobs.
Shannon.
Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for his commitment to all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Would the Prime Minister further confirm that while the goal is speed, readiness and resilience as opposed to mass mobilisation, that for the British Armed Forces to remain the best in the world, training of personnel must be a top priority to ensure that whilst we are ready for technological warfare, we are also remain ready for physical forms of war, as well as how will the review of recruitment procedures secure that very goal?
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman makes a very important point. The defence review will ensure that we remain full spectrum capable, I think is the phrase, Mr. Speaker, that the House should use. Full spectrum capable.
We now go to Sir David Evanet.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I strongly welcome and support my right honourable friend's statement. We live in difficult times, but as he states, the defence of the realm must always remain a top priority. However, this announcement will be warmly welcomed by so many British businesses who rely heavily on our defence industry. Will my right honourable friend confirm that this will safeguard jobs, helping us build back and level up opportunity across our nation?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is use this defence package spending review not just to modernise and update our armed forces in a truly revolutionary way, if you look at what the package is doing, but also to drive jobs across the whole of the UK. And it's a very, very exciting prospect.
John Speller.
Madam Deputy Speaker and Prime Minister, look, if this boost for defence spending is the first fruits of the departure of Dominic Cummings, it's most welcome, especially in ensuring we can continue to work effectively alongside our long-term allies and partners, the United States, even more so with the welcome arrival of President Biden. But can he also ensure that spending is, wherever possible, directed to firms in the UK, and that orders are also pulled forward to get British industry moving? And he can start with the Fleet Solid support ships, tell the Ministry of Defence to send out the invitations to bid, not in some ill-defined spring, as they're saying at the moment, but very early in 2021, and which would be a very welcome Christmas present and New Year message, not only for our shipyards, but also for our engineering steel industries and their communities as well.
Prime Minister.
Well, the honourable gentleman, I think he speaks for many, and he certainly speaks for me in what he says about the Fleet Solid support ships. But this is a great moment for shipbuilding in this country, and be in no doubt of the ambition of my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, who is now leading a renaissance in shipbuilding. He is the shipbuilding czar, and I'm sure he will have heard the honourable gentleman's points loud and clear.
Deanna Davison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome in the strongest possible terms the incredible announcement today from the Prime Minister. Before joining this place, I worked for a County Durham startup in research and development and saw firsthand the incredible value that R&D brings to society, particularly when tech is developed that can then be applied to other uses. And I've got no doubt that investing in military R&D will lead to advancements for civilian applications in areas like aviation and autonomous vehicles. Indeed, the technology that allows us to see the Prime Minister beamed onto our screen today first came from a military communication innovation. So can my right honourable friend confirm that this package of funding will be underpinned by a strong commitment to military research and development?
Prime Minister.
I can indeed, Mr. Speaker, and there is a big chunk of this package which is specifically dedicated to research and development, in cyber, in AI, in drone warfare, in all the warfare of the future. We need to, the victors of the future will be those that are able to master data and new technology in the way that this package supports.
We now go to Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I really welcome this commitment to our armed forces. In his statement, the Prime Minister spoke about defending our people and keeping the world safe. And I would argue that these are development objectives, thinking specifically around climate change, food security, creating stable governments, and investing to end violence against women and girls. So how will the Prime Minister ensure that development remains front and centre of the UK's new international policy following the integrated review? And can he please quash rumours and confirm his manifesto commitment to the 0.7, both now and going forwards?
Prime Minister.
As I've said several times to the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we can all be proud of our record on overseas aid, and that will continue. But it's also by investing in armed services that you can do some of the greatest things for the poorest and neediest people around the world. Traveling around the world to countries that are in real distress, I often have found that the single export that they crave the most is the help and the reassurance and the security that comes from British armed services. And that's one of the reasons helping to keep our world safe is a huge part of this agenda.
Ben Everett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our armed forces have played a crucial role in our response to this pandemic, not least in setting up and scaling the mega lab in Milton Keynes. But looking beyond Milton Keynes to the world, does the Prime Minister agree with me that this investment sends a huge message to our friends and our allies around the world that Britain is serious about security? And not only that, Madam Deputy Speaker, it sends a message to those that would do us harm, that would threaten the security of our people and our nation, that Britain is serious about defending our people, our businesses, our economy and our values.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly the purpose of this announcement. It is a long-term plan that allows us to reform our defences, and they must be reformed, they must be improved, whilst also allowing us to project force and stability around the world. That's what it is designed to do. It simultaneously creates tens of thousands of jobs across the whole of the United Kingdom. So it has a big economic benefit as well.
We now go to Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the commitment to additional future funding, but we shouldn't forget that British boots are on the ground in Afghanistan today. A consequence of President Trump's threat to reduce troop numbers would mean that the UK will need to play a greater role in building peace, security and resilience. So, can I ask the Prime Minister whether the UK stands ready to meet this challenge and ensure that the people of Afghanistan are afforded the opportunity of a more peaceful and prosperous future?
Prime Minister.
The Honourable Bannon, I recognise and admire the service that he himself has given to this country in our armed forces, and he's completely right to point to the issue of proposed potential American drawdown in those areas. We're watching it very closely, and I can tell him that we will be working with our American friends in the new administration to ensure that we continue to do whatever we can to protect the stability and security of those troubled countries.
Now go to Dr. Julian Lewis.
Thankfully, the Prime Minister is fulfilling his leadership election promise on defence spending. Given that the National Cyber Force, formally announced today, involves offensive cyber operations, I welcome the fact that the ISC will provide oversight of this joint MOD-GCHQ venture. Is my right honourable friend fully satisfied that the Intelligence and Security Committee is now properly constituted to conduct this scrutiny impartially and independently?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker. I believe that the Intelligence and Security Committee is well equipped to provide exactly that further layer of of scrutiny of cyber operations.
Now go to Owen Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister's outlined his ambition for a space control to secure space launch capability from the UK. But concerns have been raised by some in the UK-based space industry around the recently published UK-US Technology Safeguards Agreement, which has not yet been scrutinised by this place. So what guarantee can the Prime Minister give the UK-based space industry that will be essential to any space programme, and will he meet me to discuss this in more detail?
Prime Minister.
Honourable gentleman raises an important and interesting issue. I'll do my best to ensure that his concerns are addressed and that the House is able to look at all the technology safeguards measures that we're putting in place. That's obviously right.
Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, may I hugely welcome this announcement. This is a fantastic statement of resolve for the UK at home and abroad. It does more than guaranteeing the future of the Black Watch. It invests in businesses from Arbroath all the way to Abergavenny. It is a fantastic statement of the defence capability of our nation, of a whole United Kingdom. But it also raises questions. Now, this spending package is enormously important because it allows the planners to think about the future, confident in the money they will have to spend. Will he therefore commit to bringing forward as soon as possible the integrated review so that we have a strategic approach to that spending? Because this time we can't outspend the communists. We've got to outthink them.
Prime Minister.
The honourable gentleman is spot on. Actually, what this package does is set out a lot of the basic structure of the spending review. A lot of it can be of the integrated review. You can start to see the tools that we're going to be using, but we will be shortly completing the integrated review. And he's absolutely right in his fundamental point that this is about having smarter forces in order to outwit our foes. And every time that the UK has been asked to do that, we have always historically risen to that challenge. This will give us the tools to do it.
Now go to Jamie Stone.
Thank you. Can I say that as a Scottish MP, I have no doubt as to the vital role that Scotland plays in the defence of the realm. We think about recruitment of personnel, as the Prime Minister mentioned, an establishment such as Forsyth and RAF Lossiemouth are great examples. Now, on the 7th of September 1921, the Cabinet met outside London for the very first time in history. This was to consider the Irish crisis, and they met in the townhouse in Inverness. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I suggest to the Prime Minister that the UK Cabinet meets again in the Inverness townhouse on the 7th of September next year. This would be to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 1921 meeting, and it would also enable the Prime Minister and the Cabinet to review the defence of the UK by visiting such as RAF Lossiemouth, and perhaps also to learn about the great role that our armed forces have played and play right now in beating the COVID pandemic.
Prime Minister.
The honourable gentleman makes an incredibly important point about the role of our armed services in beating the COVID pandemic, which I should have made earlier on myself, Mr. Speaker. I was up in Scotland, I think actually at Lossiemouth, talking to members of our armed services who are doing the testing, helping to fly patients from remote islands to hospitals. It was wonderful to see the way UK armed services have helped during this pandemic, Mr. Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sorry, I can hardly see you down the TV screen here. But what I can say is I will bear his invitation very, very closely in mind to come to Inverness for a cabinet next year. We will study that with interest.
Now go to Peter Bone.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was a great pleasure in the previous business to praise the Prime Minister for his leadership in delivering Brexit. So it's also great to be able to praise the Prime Minister's leadership in delivering this multi-year settlement for our wonderful men and women of our armed forces. Would he like to thank all those officials and civil servants in the Ministry of Defence, all the armed forces that work many hours to help deliver this multi-year settlement? But in particular, would he like to thank the Secretary of State for Defence, whose robust work on this has helped ensure that we have come to this point and delivered for our armed forces.
Prime Minister.
It is always a pleasure to thank my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Defence, who I've known for many, many years and is a good friend of mine. But I think that he is supported, as the honourable gentleman rightly says, by thousands of brilliant officials, not to say nothing of the members of our wonderful armed services who have helped to make this package what it is. And I believe it will deliver for our people, deliver for our country for years and years to come.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the mid-90s, the UK was one of the largest contributors to UN peacekeeping missions in terms of troops and personnel. Now we only have 600 worldwide that we contribute in terms of personnel. Will this budget be a turnaround back to a proud tradition of peacekeeping troops? And will the Prime Minister actually commit to ensuring the 0.7 is not devalued at all in this wider review?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons why I'm so excited about going up to 2.2% of our spending on defence is, as the honourable gentleman points out, it will allow us to do more on peacekeeping. And by the way, I think he's right to draw attention to the way the UK could do more on peacekeeping. And I'm proud of what we're doing, for instance, in Mali. But this programme, this investment gives us the scope to do even more.
We now go to Marco Longhi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a hugely important announcement, which as a member of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Service, I know will be much welcomed by our armed forces. Will my right honourable friend confirm that it will in fact strengthen our global influence and secure jobs across a range of supply chain industries, some of which are located across Dudley Borough and the Black Country?
Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. This will be big for the Black Country because the West Midlands, once again, are at the cutting edge of technological change, the new industrial revolution, and the technologies that we will need and that are foreseen in this spending package will certainly be driving jobs in the West Midlands and around the whole UK.
Nifendu Mishra.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Britain is the penholder for Yemen at the UN Security Council, with the responsibility to support the peace process and a real opportunity to show global Britain at its best. But can the Prime Minister tell us why his government has resumed indefensible arms sales to Saudi Arabia, which has credibly been accused of human rights violations that may amount to war crimes?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, under the consolidated guidance, we have some of the strictest rules about exports of weapons to any country in the world, and everything is closely overseen and scrutinised by our lawyers and indeed judicially reviewed. And I'm content that we're doing everything in accordance with the law and in accordance with humanitarian law, Madam Deputy Speaker.
22 withdrawn, so Chion Wara.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I very much welcome this increased commitment to invest in our armed forces. Though to pay for it by reducing the commitment to global peace, which our overseas aid budget represents, would be a mistake. But I want to ask him how he's going to make sure that the jobs are created across the country by this investment. Innovative, high-tech businesses in Newcastle tell me it's easier to secure a contract with the American Department for Defence than with the British Ministry of Defence. So what is he going to do to improve procurement opportunities for small businesses?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm interested that she says that, Madam Deputy Speaker, because as I recall, you can't even sell rulers to the US military under the Pentagon's procurement policies or paper clips. But I may be in error in that. But she's making an important point about the need to source as much as we can from the UK, and that is obviously what we're going to do. It's a big opportunity to buy British, to stimulate jobs, to stimulate technology. and to drive jobs across the UK. And I've no doubt that Newcastle and the North East are going to be big beneficiaries as well.
We now go to David Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I say to the Prime Minister, this is the best and most intelligent defence statement I've heard in a quarter of a century in the House of Commons. Will he assuage, however, two concerns I have? The first is that it appears that the numerical size of the armed forces is still on a downward trend. And given that the evidence of recent wars, most recently in Nagorno-Karabakh, is that the route to success is both novel technology and conventional forces, how are we going to cope with that? And secondly, since the era of the Duke of Wellington, the MOD is not very good at managing big, expensive projects. What are we going to do about that? Prime
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, it's important to understand there are no redundancies in this package, and we're committed, as I say, to. He's right. My right honourable friend is right in what he says about the need to maintain full spectrum, and that's what it does. But you've also got to fight the wars of the future. You've got to adapt. You've got to change, and that's what this package allows us to do. It does permit us to modernise. Now, the final point that my right honourable friend made is a very important one. We are going to be following this with a very, very beady eye. There have been historic overspends, historic mistakes in procurement, some painful episodes that we don't need to go into, in which investments have not turned out well. We are setting up a unit to ensure that we get value out of this massive package.
Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's much to welcome about investment in our armed forces in this statement. But the Prime Minister will be aware that in the last month we've seen atrocities against civilians in Nigeria, jihadis on the rise in the Sahel and Mozambique, attacks on democracy in Uganda and Tanzania, and now a spiralling conflict in Ethiopia with huge refugee flows, attacks on civilians and destabilising of the region. So on that specific issue, could the Prime Minister say what he's doing now to seek an urgent de-escalation in Ethiopia and humanitarian access? And more widely, what role, given his statement today, does he see for us as a partner for peace, development, insecurity in Africa, not least given the crucial role that 0.7% commitment has played, as the Right Honourable Gentleman Suttle Coldfield set out so clearly?
Prime Minister.
Yes. Well, thank the Honourable Gentleman. We've obviously made representations to the government in Addis Ababa to de-escalate in Ethiopia. We continue to make our points with them, and this package will enable us to step up, or help us to step up our commitment to Africa. And as he may recall, when I was Foreign Secretary and now under my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, we are opening up embassies, opening up UK representation across Africa, and this package will help us to support that.
Anne-Marie Trevelyan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor for finding a way to provide this long-term financial stability for defence, despite the huge financial pressures that COVID has brought upon us this year. Getting our defence funding on a sound footing affords us the chance to ensure that it can be genuinely resilient. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that ensuring we get going at pace on the shipbuilding commitments that he has set out is critical, not only for the next generation of Royal Navy ships to be in service as soon as possible, but also because the UK, in building ships and boats across the 4 nations of the Union which they defend, can lead the world in adapting to green maritime technologies?
Prime Minister.
My right honourable friend is completely right, because we're not only massively expanding shipbuilding with the 2 frigate production lines that I've described, the 5 Type 31s at Rosyth, the 6 Type 26s in Govan. We're also committed to the Type 32. But we want to be in the lead globally, as she and I have discussed, and I thank her for all the work that she has done to champion shipbuilding and the Royal Navy. We also want to be in the lead in clean, green marine technologies, so that our ships are also emitting less carbon. That is perfectly feasible.
Now going to Peter Grant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister has announced an additional increase of just over £4 billion per year in the defence budget. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence itself admits that it already has a £6 billion budget shortfall in its equipment plan, and that shortfall could rise to as much as £13 billion over the lifetime of the plan. So can the Prime Minister tell us what he thinks the MOD's equipment budget shortfall will be at the end of the 4-year period covered by his statement today?
Prime Minister.
Sorry. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is, as I said, it's the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War. It gives us a long-term ability to reform, but it also delivers more ships, as I've said, ships, cyber, artificial intelligence, drone technology, and the future combat air system, which I think will be absolutely vital for this country. All of it creating 40,000 jobs across the UK. So this is a big step forward for our country, for our whole country.
Scott Benton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome this statement from the Prime Minister and his continuing commitment to strengthen our defence capabilities. I'm sure that my right honourable friend will agree that it is vital that other NATO members also fulfil their obligations with regards to spending 2% of their GDP on defence by 2024. And so may I ask what steps this government is taking to ensure that other members of the alliance fulfil their obligations to increase their defence spending?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is completely right, and we never tire of telling other NATO colleagues that they need to increase their defence spending for the good of the whole alliance, and we will continue to make that case. But we're doing the most powerful thing, and that is setting a fantastic example ourselves, 2.2%. And this is something that will not only help drive jobs, prosperity in the UK, protect the people of the UK, but also help to make the world safer.
Mary Kelly Foy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In June this year, the Prime Minister abolished the Department for International Development, telling me and this House that there had been massive consultation over a long period with aid organisations prior to making this decision. Since then, around 200 aid organisations and his own Secretary for State have contradicted this. Can the Prime Minister provide evidence that this consultation took place prior to making the decision, or will he now finally apologise for misleading the House?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're in daily contact and communication with the aid organisations that have benefited from the many billions of pounds that the UK contributes to international development. More than virtually any other country. We're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to work with those organisations on the ground.
I'm sure the honourable lady meant inadvertently misleading the House. We now go to Nigel Mills.
Thank you. And can I welcome this statement and the increased investment? The Prime Minister has rightly set out the importance of spending this money wisely and efficiently, and also buying as much from British suppliers as we can. So can you bring forward some revised public sector procurement rules that we can see and apply right across public spending so we can achieve both those welcome objectives?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend makes a very interesting suggestion. We want to, as I said earlier on in my answer to the right honourable gentleman from Halton, Price and Howden, we want to make sure that this money is well spent. We're going to scrutinise it very carefully. Normally, defence spending is out with most overdue procurement rules, but we will make sure that we have we spend this, we procure all this in the UK insofar as we possibly can, and use it to drive jobs and growth, and that means spending it wisely.
Tanmanjeet Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Speaker, with the Conservatives having been in power for over a decade, it is indeed ironic that the Prime Minister has just referred to coming out of an era of retreat and decline, wherein he himself has helped facilitate huge cuts to spending on our defence and our brave armed forces. But while the government has rightly sanctioned Russia for its annexation of Crimea and the appalling chemical weapons attack in Salisbury, Why has the Prime Minister failed to address the deep systemic failings in dealing with threats to our national security as identified by the Russia report?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can't. I'm afraid that the honourable gentleman is pretty indistinct from here because of the size of the screen. But that was a question from the Labour benches, I think, and it seems extraordinary that complaints about not being tough enough on Russia are being directed at the government from Labour when they were led until only a year ago by somebody who was regularly appearing on Russia TV and took the Russian side in what happened over in the Salisbury poisonings. We remain absolutely determined to protect this country from threats from all quarters, particularly from those who wish us ill, and that's why we're investing in cyber. That's why we're investing in our security in the way we are today.
We now go to Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Prime Minister, this is a fantastic announcement. He will remember last year that in the leadership campaign, I said we should be moving towards 3% of our GDP on defence. So we think exactly the same on this. But could I urge him not to listen to any voices in his ear that say the way to fund this may be a temporary cut in the 0.7% aid commitment? We spent a decade winning the argument for that. And even a temporary cut will create an enormous clamour of people who say we should not go back to it. And in a year when we've had 100 million more people going into extreme poverty, I know he would not want to send the wrong signal out to the world about our values as a country.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend and I think alike on so many of these issues, and we think alike on this too. This country can be immensely proud. He can be immensely proud of the leadership he showed on aid and development around the world when he was Foreign Secretary and in championing the needs of the underprivileged across the planet. The UK, under any view, continues to do that. Look at what we just did with the Gavi summit for global vaccines, raising about $9 billion to spread vaccines around the world. Look at we lead the world in investment in epidemic preparedness in so many ways, and we will continue to do so. The people of this country will continue to be world leaders in giving aid. And I just want to say I remember his campaign, Mr. Speaker, for Madam Deputy Speaker, for increasing funding on defence. I listened to it very carefully, and I thought he was right at the time, and I'm glad that we've been able to fulfil his expectations now.
Kenny McCaskill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When the major threat is terrorism, largely homegrown and driven by inequalities and prejudice, with other budgets cut, inequality rising and prejudice increasing, how will all the King's soldiers and all the King's weaponry put further victims together again?
Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thought that I couldn't quite hear that question, but it seemed to me to be saying that terrorism was somehow caused by injustice in this country. I don't believe that to be true.
We now go to Philip Dunn.
I very warmly welcome this material increase in defence budgets, Prime Minister, and in particular the multi-year nature of this settlement. One of the significant reasons for challenges in defence budgeting is the stop-start nature of political decision-making on these multi-year projects. So this statement will help get the equipment plan both modernised and back on track, which I very warmly welcome. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the United Kingdom can now fully take into account the UK prosperity impact of defence procurement, and will he do what he can to ensure that state aid issues and the opportunity cost of making in the UK will be fully recognised by the Treasury?
Prime Minister.
My right honourable friend makes a really important point. This is a big moment for us to ensure that these colossal investments do drive jobs and growth in this country. And that's what they are going to do. And that's why I'm so thrilled about the announcements for shipbuilding in particular. But it's not just shipbuilding, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's new jobs in new technology in all kinds of ways across the whole country.
Now go to Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can only assume that Conservative members of Parliament have been awfully punch drunk on the numbers, because what the Prime Minister has effectively done is rip up the integrated review by announcing the spending before the review itself. Surely the review is supposed to inform the spending. But let me ask the Prime Minister a specific question about a specific promise. At the last independence referendum, his party promised 12,500 permanently based armed forces personnel in Scotland. Can I ask him if that promise will be met by the time of the next independence referendum?
Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, forgive me. He asked a very interesting question about a hypothetical political event, which is at least a generation away. But what I can say to him is that there is absolutely no threat to the Black Watch, Diffid in East Kilbride, or any of the other fantastic investments that this package brings to Scotland. And it's a fantastic thing for our country and for our union.
Going now to John Barron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This announcement is extremely welcome, and one, as an ex-soldier, I know will be well received by our superb armed forces. My right honourable friend will know that the integrated review offers the opportunity to consider Britain's foreign policy assets in the round, including its world-class soft power capabilities. Can you therefore confirm that when the review is published, it will reflect the recommendations of the recent British Council APPG report and include a soft power strategy at its core, as well as a central role for Britain's primary soft power assets, including the British Council?
Prime Minister.
I really thank my right honourable friend, because he's right to highlight the importance of soft power, and studies have shown that we're amongst the biggest soft power wielders in the world. We are a soft power superpower. That has many components. The British Council is certainly one of them, but a robust, self-confident defence policy allowing us to project strength around the world is also hugely valuable. Hard power leads to soft power.
Ms Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for his statement. Like many people across Newport West, I welcome the election of Joe Biden as President of the United States and Kamala Harris as First Woman Vice President. So in his recent phone call with President-elect Biden, can the Prime Minister tell us how he explained the actions of his government's undermining of the Good Friday Agreement?
Prime Minister.
Well, what I said to President-elect Biden was how much I congratulated him and Kamala Harris on their election, how much we looked forward to working together on a number of issues on Northern Ireland. I made the point that we both shared a strong desire to uphold the Good Friday Agreement, the stability of Northern Ireland, and that was the purpose of the UK Internal Market Bill. But more importantly, we talked about what we were going to do to advance the cause of free trade, of international democracy around the world, of human rights, but also tackling climate change. And it was a very good phone call.
We now go to Crispin Blunt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In welcoming this statement and strongly supporting the central purpose of the integrated review of defence, diplomacy and development to better defend free societies, I trust my right honourable friend's government will continue to show global leadership in supporting the rights of all people to that most fundamental freedom to be themselves and to live their lives as they wish. So does the opportunity of the integrated review enable him to make real the rhetorical commitment to LGBT+ people globally with the relatively modest sums needed from the integrated budget to deliver British leadership in programmes that can make a massive difference to the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world, so they can enjoy the freedom Britons have to be themselves. I wrote to the Foreign Secretary on this on the 4th of September and on the 12th of October. Does the review now enable him to say yes to that request?
Prime Minister.
Yes, it does, Madam Deputy Speaker, and he raises a very important point that is close to my heart. And I argue with countries around the world that repress the LGBT rights, that don't see the things the way we do in this country, that they're making not just a profound social and moral mistake, they're making an economic mistake. Because I think it's our attitude to those issues, the way we've advanced LGBT rights in this country, that actually is of huge, huge value to the lives of people in this country, people's happiness and people's willingness to come to live here, to invest, to make their lives here. It makes a huge, huge difference. That's the point I make to friends and partners around the world. And we will continue to do so under this review. That is certainly part of it. And I seem to remember when I was Foreign Secretary, one of the first things I did, I can tell my right honourable friend, was to make sure that all our embassies around the world felt able to fly the multicolour LGBT flag whenever they wanted to.
We now go to Emma Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm really pleased to hear the Prime Minister recognise the excellent work the armed forces have been doing throughout this pandemic. So what I'm hoping is that the Prime Minister will make some of those excellent armed force personnel available to Hull and East Riding to assist us during this awful time we're facing right now with our health emergency.
Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Honourable Lady is making a really, really good point and a good request, because we're looking at what we can do with our armed services to ramp up and roll out the lateral flow mass testing, the rapid turnaround tests that people, I hope, are starting to be aware of. We're looking for places to trial that, in addition to what we've done in Liverpool, and the armed services will certainly be playing a part in that.
The final question, we go to Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I wholeheartedly welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to not only increasing defence spending, but also the investment in new military technology. I have companies in my constituency, such as Drone Defence in Retford, who specialise in innovative drone technology. And can I invite the Prime Minister to visit Drone Defence and show our commitment that British companies such as this will be at the forefront of this investment? And would he agree that this is not just an investment in our nation's defence, but also in local high-skilled jobs?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to hear about the company he raises, a Drone Defence. I understand that they're also been able to take on some new young employees through the Kickstart scheme, and that's great. These are exactly the kind of cutting-edge companies that we're going to be supporting, but also many other types of industry and business across the country. And I will certainly look forward to coming to see him in Bassetlaw, where I think we have good news on the hospital as well.
Thank you. 3-minute suspension to allow the safe exit and entry of honourable and right honourable members.
Ensuring that Britain invests more in defence than any other European country and more than any NATO ally except the United States. We'll embark on the full-scale modernisation of our armed forces, equipping them with the new technology that will revolutionise warfare, creating thousands of jobs across the United Kingdom in shipbuilding and advanced manufacturing and emerging technology, levelling up our country and assuring that we build back better. I'm doing this in the teeth of the pandemic, despite all the other calls on our resources, because the defence of the realm is the first duty of government. So let's end the era of retreat. strengthen our armed forces, unite and level up our country, and extend British influence as a force for good in the world. Our armed